I still remember that morning as if it were carved into my soul. The moment I saw them, my ex-wife and her new husband, leaning against my car with smirks that cut deeper than any knife. Their eyes sparkled with triumph and cruelty, a silent mockery of my life as I pulled up for the school drop-off. In that instant, every hope I once clung to shattered like fragile glass. I felt exposed and humiliated, betrayed by the past and trapped in a present that offered no escape. That ambush at the school gate marked the beginning of a day, and a chapter, that would forever change who I believed I was. It began like any other weekday. I had risen early, the persistent buzz of my alarm clock dragging me out of restless sleep, and I trudged through my morning routine with an air of resignation. The routine itself had become a comfort, a predictable cadence after the tumult of my divorce. Yet, that day the familiar rhythms of life shattered when I arrived at the school parking lot. I slowed down, scanning the usual sea of parents and children when I saw them. Lisa, my ex-wife, and Mark, her new husband. They stood side by side, casually chatting and laughing, their bodies angled in perfect synchrony as if they had rehearsed this very moment. Their eyes locked onto mine with an unmistakable smirk, and in that frozen second, I felt every failure, every moment of self-doubt, and every bruise of regret converge. 4 years I had been trying to rebuild what I thought was left of my life after our divorce. A life punctuated by the relentless pursuit of stability for my children, a life where I could be both a father and an individual. Yet, as I watched Lisa's carefree laughter mingling with Mark's condescending grin, I felt the bitter sting of humiliation. Their presence was a constant reminder of everything I had lost. The love that once bound us, the dreams we had built together, and the future that had been so abruptly snatched away. In that moment, the school drop-off, a place that should have been filled with the innocent chatter of children and the mundane rituals of a new day, turned into a battleground where my failures were paraded before me. I parked my car on the edge of the lot, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. The world around me seemed to slow, every detail magnified. I could see the gentle smile of a little girl bidding farewell to her mother, the hurried steps of other parents eager to start their day, and then there they were again, Lisa and Mark, as if they had no care in the world, as if my existence were nothing more than a punchline to an elaborate joke. Their smirks were not merely expressions, they were declarations. They said without a word that I was an afterthought, a man who had failed at love, a father who had been left to pick up the shattered remnants of his own heart. As I stepped out of the car, the cool morning air hit me with the force of 1,000 unspoken accusations. My children bounded toward me, their bright eyes momentarily distracting me from the pain, but I could not escape the look that had been etched into my memory. I managed to smile, forcing cheerfulness into my voice, but inside, a storm raged. The echoes of laughter and whispered comments from passers-by merged with the haunting image of Lisa's knowing glance and Mark's arrogant tilt of his head. It was as if they had orchestrated this encounter, a final, cruel chapter in the story of our failed union. In the hours that followed, I found myself questioning every decision that had led me to this moment. I recalled the years when Lisa and I had shared dreams of a future filled with hope and promise, the times when love had seemed infinite and unbreakable. I remembered our wedding day, the joyful faces of friends and family, and the promises we had made beneath a sky of possibility. And then, like the turning of a page written in water, everything had dissolved into bitterness and acrimony. The divorce had been messy, riddled with accusations and regret, leaving both of us to wander separately through a landscape of lost dreams. I had tried to rebuild my life, clinging to the belief that time would heal all wounds, that my children's laughter would eventually drown out the echoes of my broken heart. I enrolled in evening classes, threw myself into work, and even attempted to open myself up to new relationships. Yet, no matter how much I tried to move forward, the shadow of that failed marriage lingered. The ambush at the school drop-off was a brutal reminder that the past was not done with me yet. It had come back to haunt me in the most public, unyielding way. That day, as the school day wore on and I drove my children to their classes, the image of Lisa and Mark persisted in my mind. I found myself replaying the moment over and over, each detail as vivid as if it had happened moments ago rather than weeks, months, or years since the divorce. I began to wonder, did they always plan to revel in my misery? Was this a one-time accidental encounter, or had they been waiting for the perfect moment to remind me of my inadequacies? The questions churned in my mind as I sat through meetings and routine work, each minute an eternity of introspection. At lunch, I sat alone in the break room, staring blankly at my untouched sandwich, my mind far away in the memories of that humiliating morning. The murmurs of co-workers discussing trivial matters offered little solace. I felt isolated, adrift in a sea of regret and self-reproach. I remembered the advice of a trusted friend who had once told me, "Pain is temporary, but dignity is forever." Yet, dignity felt like a relic from another life, a life when I was whole, when I still believed that love and respect were not casualties of failed relationships. After work, I took a detour home, hoping to avoid the familiar route that would lead me past the school. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony. As I drove, I caught glimpses of the same smirking faces in my rearview mirror. The memory of that morning had imprinted itself onto every reflective surface of my life. It was as though the universe had conspired to remind me that no matter how far I ran, the scars of the past were indelible. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of bitter coffee, my eyes fixed on the dark liquid as if it contained the answers to my torment. I reflected on the choices I had made, the dreams I had once believed in, and the pain of watching the person I had loved slip away into the arms of another. I thought about Lisa, her laughter, her beauty, the way she had seemed to transform before my eyes from the woman I adored into someone unrecognizable, someone who now took pleasure in my suffering. And I thought about Mark, a man I had never truly known, who had somehow become the symbol of everything I had lost. His smug grin, his casual arrogance, they were like salt in the wound, a daily reminder that I was left with nothing but memories and a bitter taste in my mouth. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, haunted by the ghosts of that morning. In the darkness, I could almost hear their laughter, see their faces illuminated by the harsh glare of reality. I began to question whether I had ever truly known happiness, whether the dreams I had once nurtured were nothing more than illusions destined to crumble under the weight of life's harsh truths. In the silence of the night, I made a silent vow. I would not let this humiliation define me. I would gather the fragments of my shattered self and rebuild, piece by painful piece, into something stronger, something that could withstand the cruelty of fate. As the days turned into weeks, I started to push back against the venom of those memories. I threw myself into my work, dedicating long hours to projects that challenged me and forced me to look beyond the scars of the past. I began to exercise more, not just to improve my physical health but as a way to reclaim control over my body and, by extension, my mind. I took long walks in the early morning light, where the crisp air and the gentle hum of the city offered a semblance of solace. With each step, I felt as if I were slowly reclaiming a part of myself that had been lost in the wreckage of my failed marriage. I also reached out to an old friend, someone who had witnessed the heights and depths of my life before the divorce. Over cups of strong coffee and long conversations that stretched into the early hours, we talked about everything: the betrayal, the humiliation, and the slow, agonizing process of learning to live with oneself after love had been lost. My friend reminded me that every scar, every painful memory, was a testament to survival, a reminder that I had endured more than I had ever imagined. He urged me to see that while the pain was real and raw, it was also an opportunity for transformation, a chance to redefine who I was and what I wanted from life. Slowly, I began to see glimmers of hope. I joined a local support group for people who had experienced marital trauma and heartbreak, a gathering where stories of loss and redemption were shared with raw honesty and mutual understanding. In that safe space, I found not only empathy but a shared resolve to overcome the tragedies that had marred our lives. The stories of others, tales of loss, perseverance, and eventual triumph, reminded me that I was not alone. We were all walking wounded souls, trying to piece together lives that had been shattered by betrayal and pain. And together we discovered that while the wounds might never fully disappear, they could eventually become the stepping stones toward a brighter future. One particularly transformative evening, as autumn began to give way to winter's chill, I found myself at a small, intimate gathering organized by the support group. We sat in a circle in a cozy living room, the soft glow of candles casting gentle shadows on our faces as we shared our stories. When it was my turn, I hesitated for a moment before recounting the painful memory of that ambush at the school drop-off. I spoke of the humiliation, the anger, and the crushing weight of betrayal that had nearly driven me to despair. As I spoke, I felt a surprising release, a catharsis that came from voicing the pain that I had long kept locked away inside. The eyes that met mine were filled not with pity but with a shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement that we were all capable of surviving even the most devastating blows. That night, as I walked home beneath a sky studded with stars, I realized that while I could not change what had happened, I could choose how it would shape my future. I vowed to honor my own worth, to rebuild my life on my own terms, and to let the memory of that humiliating morning become a catalyst for growth rather than a chain that bound me to my past. I promised myself that I would no longer allow the sneers of my ex-wife and her new husband to dictate my sense of self. Instead, I would use their contempt as fuel, a reminder that the person I was becoming was far stronger and more resilient than the man I had once been. As winter melted into the tentative warmth of spring, I embarked on a journey of self-discovery. I enrolled in a creative writing class, a decision that opened up new avenues for expression and healing. With every word I put on paper, I began to reclaim parts of my identity that had been buried beneath layers of grief and resentment. I wrote of loss and love, of pain and hope, and gradually the act of writing became a sanctuary, a place where I could transform my most painful memories into something beautiful and meaningful. I also made a conscious effort to reconnect with my children, to be the steady, supportive presence they needed in the midst of all the upheaval. I realized that while I could not undo the past, I could shape our future together. We spent weekends exploring local parks, laughing over board games, and cooking simple meals that filled our modest home with warmth and togetherness. My children's resilience, their ability to find joy even in the smallest moments, reminded me that life could still be beautiful, that hope could still blossom in the most unexpected places. And then, one crisp spring morning as I was dropping my children off at school, I caught a glimpse of the same smirking faces again. This time, however, I was not paralyzed by shame or consumed by anger. I met their gaze with quiet resolve, a silent affirmation that I had grown beyond the pain of that ambush. In that fleeting moment, I recognized that their smugness was no longer a measure of my worth but a testament to how far I had come. The hurt that once defined me had been tempered by time, transformed into the strength I now carried with me like an invisible armor. That day marked a turning point, a moment when I truly understood that my past, as painful as it was, would no longer control my future. I had taken the fragments of my broken heart and, through countless small acts of courage, rebuilt them into something whole and resilient. The image of my ex-wife and her new husband, once a source of endless humiliation, had lost its power over me. Instead, it served as a reminder of the journey I had undertaken, a journey of self-discovery, healing, and ultimately renewal. Now, as I sit here reflecting on those turbulent times, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the lessons learned and the strength gained. The ambush at the school drop-off, as bitter and painful as it was, catalyzed a profound transformation in me. It forced me to confront my vulnerabilities, to face the raw truth of my own worth, and to rebuild my life with a determination that I never knew I possessed. I have learned that while betrayal may leave scars, those scars can also be the source of our greatest strength and resilience. In the quiet moments of early morning, as I prepare to embrace another day filled with the promise of new beginnings, I am no longer the man who was once humiliated at the school gate. I have become someone defined not by the sneers of my past, but by the love I now share with my children, the friendships I have forged, and the life I continue to build, one day at a time. My ex-wife and her new husband may have once mocked my life, but their contempt has been transformed into the fuel that propels me forward, into the determination that each new sunrise is a chance to start again. I realize now that every betrayal, every painful memory has a purpose in guiding us toward the truth of who we are and what we truly deserve. I have learned to cherish the small victories, the quiet moments of self-affirmation, and the deep, abiding love that emerges when we refuse to let our past define us. And so, as I continue to walk this path of healing and self-discovery, I do so with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that I am, at last, in control of my own destiny. The day after that fateful ambush, I woke up with a heaviness I couldn't quite shake. It was as though every whispered sneer and every mocking glance from the school drop-off had seeped into my bones, making me doubt every choice I had ever made. For weeks afterward, I found myself haunted by that moment, the way my ex-wife's laughter and her new husband's smug demeanor had burned into my memory. Yet even as those images tormented me, they also stirred something deep inside, a determination to reclaim my identity, to prove that I was not defined by their cruelty. I began by embracing the quiet mornings before the chaos of the day. I would rise early and take long walks around my neighborhood, allowing the cool, dewy air to wash over me. As I strolled down familiar streets, I practiced a simple exercise. I would name each sound, each color, each fleeting moment of beauty I encountered. The rustling leaves in the gentle breeze, the glimmer of sunlight on a dew-speckled blade of grass, the soft hum of distant traffic. Each detail served as a reminder that life continued unabated, indifferent to my inner turmoil. Slowly, I began to see these small wonders as the building blocks of a new beginning. In these moments of solitude, I confronted the memories of that humiliating morning. I recalled every nuance, the way my heart had pounded as I saw them leaning casually against my car, the sting of their smirks, and the overwhelming sense of betrayal. At first, the memories filled me with despair, but gradually I learned to acknowledge them without letting them dictate my self-worth. I realized that while I could never erase the past, I could transform its painful lessons into strength. One particularly crisp morning, after one of those long walks, I sat in a quiet corner of my favorite local cafe. With a steaming cup of coffee in hand and my journal open before me, I began to write. I poured out every thought, every tear, every flicker of anger and the slowly emerging spark of hope. I wrote about the pain of being ambushed at the school gate, the visceral humiliation of knowing that my ex-wife and her new husband had made a spectacle of my life, and then I wrote about the little victories that had started to reshape me. With each word, the scars that had once felt like permanent reminders of failure began to soften, revealing the resilient core beneath. I started attending a support group for parents grappling with the fallout of painful divorces. In that safe, unguarded space, I met people whose stories were as raw and varied as my own. There was Michelle, who had lost her sense of identity in the acrimony of a bitter separation, and James, whose quiet determination to rebuild his life after being abandoned by his partner resonated with me deeply. Sharing our stories, listening to one another's journeys from heartbreak to healing, I discovered that I was not alone. The support group became a beacon of understanding and empathy, a place where my pain was met with compassion rather than judgment. Through these meetings, I slowly realized that vulnerability was not a weakness but a necessary step toward wholeness. Encouraged by this newfound sense of solidarity, I decided to step outside of my comfort zone even further. I enrolled in a creative writing class at a community college, a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. In that class, I discovered that the act of writing could serve as a form of therapy, a way to articulate feelings too complex to be spoken aloud. I wrote short stories and poems that chronicled the twists and turns of my journey, from the searing humiliation at the school drop-off to the small, everyday moments of courage that slowly redefined me. With every sentence, I reclaimed a piece of myself that had been lost in the wreckage of betrayal. The creative process taught me that even the deepest wounds could give rise to beautiful expressions of resilience and hope. As the months passed, I began to rebuild my life with deliberate intention. I started exercising regularly, not merely to improve my physical health, but as a way to forge a stronger connection with my body and mind. I took up running, finding that the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement was almost meditative. With each mile, I shed layers of self-doubt and insecurity, replacing them with the steady cadence of progress. Running became a metaphor for my journey. Sometimes the road was steep and challenging, but with perseverance I could push forward, step by determined step. My relationship with my children, too, began to flourish in ways I had long feared were lost. I made it a priority to be present for them, to show them that even in the midst of my own pain, there was always room for love and joy. Weekends became our sacred time, filled with trips to the park, impromptu picnics, and evenings spent playing board games. Their laughter and boundless optimism were constant reminders that life's most profound happiness often came in the simplest moments. Through their eyes, I began to see that I was capable of love and renewal, and that my past, no matter how painful, did not have to define my future. One evening, nearly a year after that dreadful day at the school drop-off, I received an invitation to speak at a local community event. The theme was overcoming adversity, and I was hesitant at first. Public speaking had never been my forte, and the thought of exposing my most vulnerable memories before a crowd filled me with dread. Yet something inside me stirred, a desire to share my story not as a tale of defeat, but as a testament to the human spirit's ability to rise above even the darkest moments. I spent weeks preparing, crafting my narrative with care, interweaving moments of raw honesty with the small triumphs that had defined my journey. When the day of the event arrived, I stood backstage, my heart pounding and my hands trembling. The auditorium was filled with people from all walks of life, each one carrying their own burdens, their own stories of pain and perseverance. As I stepped onto the stage and looked out into the sea of expectant faces, I felt a profound connection. In that moment, I realized that my story, once a source of unbearable shame, could now serve as a beacon of hope for others. I spoke of the ambush at the school drop-off, of the smirking faces that had haunted my every morning, and of the slow, deliberate journey that had transformed my pain into a source of strength. The words flowed out of me with a mixture of sorrow and quiet determination, and as I finished, the applause that erupted in the silence was like music, a validation that my voice mattered, that my scars were symbols of survival rather than shame. That night, as I drove home under a star-filled sky, I felt lighter than I had in years. The city lights blurred past, each one a tiny reminder that life was a tapestry of countless moments, some bitter, some sweet, and some that defied categorization entirely. I thought about the people who had joined me on my journey, friends from the support group, fellow writers from my class, and even strangers who had reached out after hearing my story. Their words of encouragement and shared understanding filled me with gratitude and reinforced the belief that even the most painful chapters of our lives are not meant to be the final word. A turning point in my transformation came when I decided to reach out to a long-lost friend. Someone who had seen me at my lowest, someone who had once believed in the man I used to be. We met for coffee at a small, cozy cafe that overlooked a busy street. Over steaming cups of coffee and gentle conversation, I recounted my struggles with vulnerability and the journey of self-discovery that had followed the ambush at the school drop-off. My friend listened intently, his eyes reflecting a deep empathy that reminded me of the enduring bonds of true friendship. He told me that the strength he now saw in me was born of the pain I had endured, a strength that not everyone had the courage to claim. In his words, I found not only validation but a renewed commitment to continue on my path of healing. As summer approached, life began to take on a new vibrancy. Elena and I planned a small vacation, a retreat to a quiet lakeside cabin far from the relentless pace of the city. There, in the gentle embrace of nature, we found a reprieve from our daily struggles. Mornings were spent watching the mist rise over the lake, afternoons exploring nearby trails where wildflowers painted the landscape with bursts of color, and evenings huddled by a crackling fire as we shared our dreams for the future. The tranquility of that place was a balm for my wounded soul, a living reminder that even after the harshest winters, spring always followed. In the quiet solitude of the cabin, I allowed myself to dream again, to envision a future defined not by past humiliations, but by the promise of new beginnings. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I reflected on how far I had come. The memory of that humiliating morning at the school drop-off, once a source of endless torment, had gradually transformed into a quiet reminder of my resilience. I realized that the very people who had once mocked me had unwittingly propelled me toward a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. Their cruel smiles had been the catalyst that forced me to confront my pain and to rebuild my identity from the ground up. In the months that followed, I continued to nurture the life I had begun to rebuild. I immersed myself in my writing, capturing the nuances of my experiences in essays and poems that resonated with readers who had faced their own challenges. I expanded my creative horizons, attending workshops and collaborating with other artists who, like me, saw beauty in the struggle. The creative process became a sanctuary, a place where every tear and every moment of despair was transformed into art. My work was published in local magazines, and I even received invitations to speak at various events about overcoming adversity. Each new opportunity was a step further away from the person I had once been, and a testament to the power of transformation. Perhaps the most profound change of all was the way I began to view myself. I no longer saw myself solely through the lens of past humiliation or betrayal. Instead, I recognized that the struggles I had endured had given me a depth of empathy, a strength of character, and a capacity for love that was richer than any superficial measure of success. I learned to forgive, not just my ex-wife for the pain she had caused, but also myself for the mistakes I had made along the way. Forgiveness, I discovered, was not about forgetting the past but about releasing its hold on the present, so that I could move forward with a lighter heart and a clearer vision of what truly mattered. As autumn arrived once again, I found myself standing at a crossroads. One path led back to the familiar, painful memories of humiliation, and the other led forward to a future brimming with possibility. I chose the latter, bolstered by the support of my friends, the love of my children, and the unwavering presence of Elena, whose gentle strength had helped me reclaim my sense of self. I began to set new goals for my life, goals that were not defined by what I had lost but by what I could still create. I planned to start a blog chronicling my journey, to reach out to others who might be struggling in silence, and to celebrate every small victory along the way. One chilly morning, as I was dropping my children off at school once more, I felt a shift inside me. The memory of that earlier ambush no longer filled me with dread. Instead, it served as a quiet reminder of how far I had come. I looked in the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of my own eyes, steady, determined, and resolute. I knew that no matter what the future held, I had forged a new path defined not by humiliation, but by hope, resilience, and the unwavering belief that I was worthy of love and respect. That day as I drove away, I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that radiated a newfound confidence. I realized that while the past would always be a part of me, it no longer held dominion over my present. The hurt and the laughter of my ex-wife and her new husband had been transformed into the fuel that propelled me forward. I was not the man I once was. I was stronger, wiser, and more in tune with the truth of who I was meant to be. Now, as I sit here and reflect on the winding road that led me from that painful ambush to this place of quiet triumph, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I am grateful for every tear shed in solitude, every sleepless night spent wrestling with memories, and every small step that led me to rediscover the beauty of life. I have learned that even when life ambushes you with humiliation and heartbreak, there is always a way to rise again, to rebuild, to heal, and to embrace a future filled with endless possibility. In the end, I know that my journey is far from over. There will be more challenges, more moments that test my resolve, and perhaps even more encounters with those who once tried to diminish me. But I face the future with the knowledge that I have overcome the darkest days of my past and emerged stronger for it. The scars remain, but they are now symbols of my resilience, a roadmap of the trials I have overcome and the triumphs I have achieved. As I prepare to write the next chapter of my life, I do so with a heart that is open, a mind that is clear, and a spirit that is unbroken. The ambush at the school drop-off, once a moment of searing pain, has become a catalyst for transformation. A reminder that even in our most vulnerable moments, we have the power to rebuild our lives and create something truly extraordinary. And so, with each new sunrise, I choose to move forward, to celebrate every small victory, and to live my life on my own terms. I have learned that the measure of a person is not found in the cruelty of others, but in the strength with which they rise above it. Today I am proud of the man I have become, a man who has turned betrayal into a stepping stone, who has transformed humiliation into a source of empowerment, and who now looks to the future with hope, courage, and an unyielding commitment to living a life defined by love and authenticity. This is my story, a story of pain, transformation, and ultimately redemption. And as I continue to forge my path, I know that no matter what challenges lie ahead, I will face them with the quiet determination of a soul that has been reborn. The laughter that once mocked me now serves as a distant echo, a reminder of a past that has given way to a future I am proud to embrace. The journey from humiliation to healing is long and winding, but every step taken with honesty and resilience leads to a destination where true happiness and self-worth flourish. And in that destination, I have found not only forgiveness for those who once hurt me but a deep, abiding love for myself. A love that will guide me through every storm and shine brightly in every new dawn.